Americans and history buffs, picture this. The year is 1792, only a handful of years after the American Revolution, and a Frenchman whose name you know, a man who helped build the country you live in, is sitting in a stone cell in an Austrian dungeon. They've taken his watch, his razor, and his books. He hasn't seen the sunlight in weeks. He doesn't know if his wife is alive or if his children are safe. The revolutionaries in France want him and his family dead. The monarchs in Austria want him silenced, and the country he helped create, the United States of America, has declared neutrality. He is completely and utterly alone. But he has one card left to play, a card that no one in history has ever played before: his American citizenship. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and this is the story of what may be the most important dual citizen in American history, a man who earned his citizenship not with paperwork, but with his blood, his fortune, and his unwavering belief in what the country could become. And the way he used that citizenship, the way his family used it, didn't just make legal history, it saved their lives. So come with me on this journey as we explore a one-of-a-kind, first-of-a-kind adventure by the legend himself. A story that stretches from the battlefields of the American Revolution to the dungeons of Europe to an act of the United States Congress signed 218 years after it happened. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you will understand why this story is not just history, it's more relevant today than it has ever been. If you enjoy this kind of deep, well-researched content that makes you smarter about citizenship and global mobility, hit subscribe right now. The laws around citizenship and immigration are changing faster than at any point in modern history, and this channel helps you stay ahead of it all. And leave a like so that the content I make for you actually gets sent to you. Now, let's talk about who this man actually was. His full name is Marie-Joseph Paul-Yves Roch Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette, the man who we simply call Lafayette. He had a name longer than most people's Netflix watch lists. But I prefer his nickname, the hero of two worlds. And when you hear what he did, you'll understand why even that title doesn't do him justice. Lafayette was born in 1757 in the south of France into one of the oldest noble families in the country. His father was killed by a British cannonball when Lafayette was just 2 years old. By the time he was a teenager, he was one of the wealthiest young men in all of France. Title, money, status, a marriage connected to the royal court. He had everything, and he gave it all up. In 1777, at the age of 19, Lafayette heard about a group of colonists fighting for the idea that ordinary people had the right to govern themselves. And something inside this teenager caught fire. He didn't just volunteer. He bought an entire ship. He named it La Victory, the Victory. And in direct defiance of King Louis XVI, who had explicitly forbidden him to go, Lafayette disguised himself, dodged the authorities, slipped across the border into Spain, and set sail for America. He was 19 years old, a teenager with everything to lose and nothing material to gain, defying his king and crossing an entire ocean to fight for a country that didn't even exist yet. When he arrived, he told Congress that he would serve at his own expense. No salary. All he asked was for the rank of Major General and a chance to fight. Congress said yes. Shortly thereafter, he met George Washington. Now, Washington had no biological sons. Lafayette had lost his father at 2. The bond was immediate. Washington took him to see the Continental Army camp, and when he apologized for the state of his troops, Lafayette said something that Washington would never forget. "I am here to learn, not to teach." From that moment, Washington treated Lafayette like a son, and Lafayette proved he was worthy of it. At the Battle of Brandywine, his very first combat engagement, he was shot in the leg, but he kept fighting. He rallied retreating troops before he would let anyone tend to his wound. He spent his own fortune on supplies and salaries for his men. A few years later, he returned to France and personally convinced the government to send 6,000 soldiers and some warships to aid the Americans. He returned as well, and in 1781, he helped trap British General Cornwallis at Yorktown. That battle ended the Revolutionary War and gave birth to the United States. Lafayette didn't just help win the war, he helped make victory possible. Now here's where the story becomes an Evolution Expat story. After the war, Lafayette returned to France, but America did not forget him. In 1784, the Maryland General Assembly did something extraordinary. They passed a resolution declaring, and I'm quoting the actual legal text here, "The Marquis de Lafayette and his heirs male forever shall be, and they are hereby deemed, adjudged, and taken to be natural-born citizens of this state." Natural-born citizens, not honorary, not symbolic, natural-born citizens. Virginia, Connecticut, and Massachusetts passed similar resolutions. But Maryland's was the most powerful because it included his heirs and used the specific legal language of birthright citizenship. Now think about that timing. This was 1784. The Constitution wouldn't be ratified until 1789. The concept of federal citizenship barely existed, and Maryland was saying that this Frenchman and his sons and their sons after them are natural-born citizens of our state forever. When the Constitution was ratified, Lafayette's Maryland citizenship carried over. He was a citizen of the United States of America, a real one. He later boasted that he was an American citizen before the French Revolution had even created the concept of a French citizenship. Before then, they were merely subjects of the king. And during his term, President Thomas Jefferson said he would have offered Lafayette the governorship of Louisiana if he had wanted it. This second citizenship was not a ceremonial gesture. This was real, legal, consequential citizenship. The kind that would, in the darkest chapter of Lafayette's life, become the most important thing his family had, because his story is about to take a very dark turn. Now, back in France, Lafayette threw himself into the French Revolution. He co-wrote the Declaration of the Rights of Man with Thomas Jefferson. He became head of the Paris National Guard. He was trying to build in France what he had helped to build in America. But the French Revolution was not the American Revolution. It turned violent and radical. Lafayette, a moderate, suddenly had enemies everywhere. The Jacobins thought he was too conservative. The Royalists thought he was a traitor. In August of 1792, the radicals seized control and issued a warrant for his arrest. If they caught him, he faced the guillotine. So, Lafayette gathered 52 of his most loyal men and rode for the coast, hoping to reach a ship to America, his country, the country where he was a citizen. But he never made it. Near the Belgian border, Austrian troops arrested them all. The Austrians didn't see him as an American citizen. They saw a dangerous revolutionary whose ideas threatened every monarchy in Europe, including their own. What followed was 5 years and 1 month of absolute hell for him. Lafayette was moved from prison to prison and ended up at the fortress of Olmütz in Moravia. They stripped him of everything, his watch, his razor, every book about democracy he had. His cell was built into the city walls next to a river of raw sewage. Damp, dark, nobody knew where he was. And this is where Lafayette played his card. He contacted the United States minister in The Hague and invoked his American citizenship. He argued that as a citizen of the United States, he was being illegally held by a foreign power. As far as I can tell with my research, this was the first time in history that anyone had ever tried to use a dual citizenship as a legal shield. And it was brilliant. It was courageous. And it was absolutely the right call. But it didn't work immediately. Washington, who was now president, loved Lafayette like a son, but America had declared neutrality. The country didn't even have diplomatic relations with Austria. And Lafayette's status as a French military officer technically took legal precedence over his American citizenship. Washington couldn't intervene openly without dragging the United States into a European war. So, he sent money, he wrote letters, and worked every back channel that he could, and then he waited. But here's where the story becomes about family. Here's where I need you to understand what dual citizenship actually means when the world falls apart. While Lafayette sat in his cell, his wife Adrienne was living her own nightmare. The reign of terror was consuming France. Adrienne's mother was sent to the guillotine. Her grandmother was sent to the guillotine. Her sister was sent to the guillotine. Adrienne herself was arrested and was awaiting her own execution. She survived only through the intervention of James Monroe, the American minister to France. And then Adrienne de Lafayette did something that I think is one of the most extraordinary acts of courage in the history of dual citizenship. She wanted to get to Austria to find her husband, but France was at war with Austria. No French citizen could cross the border. The journey was impossible for a French citizen. But Adrienne had something else. She had her husband's American citizenship. So the American consul in Hamburg issued Adrienne a United States passport in the name of Madame Motier, a resident of Hartford, Connecticut, because Lafayette had been granted citizenship by Connecticut as well. A French noblewoman whose family had just been slaughtered by the Revolution traveled across wartime Europe on an American passport. She made it to Vienna. She obtained an audience with the Austrian emperor. And when she asked to share her husband's imprisonment, the emperor said that he could not release Lafayette, but he would allow her to join him in his cell. So she took her 2 daughters and walked into that dungeon voluntarily. She chose imprisonment with her husband over freedom without him. They spent nearly 2 years together in that cell. Meanwhile, their son, whom they had named Georges Washington de Lafayette, escaped using his status as the son of an American, living in safety in the United States at the home of President George Washington in Mount Vernon. A French child protected by an American citizenship raised in the home of the first president of the United States. So if anyone ever tells you that a dual citizenship is somehow disloyal, unpatriotic, or un-American, point them to this story. The most patriotic family in the history of the French-American alliance survived because of dual citizenship. A mother used an American passport to cross a war zone. A father invoked American citizenship from inside a dungeon. A child found safety in America because of a bond between two nations that citizenship made real, legal, and enforceable. Dual citizenship didn't undermine Lafayette's loyalty. It was the ultimate expression of it. The proof that you can belong to two countries without betraying either one. So, after 5 years and 1 month, his ordeal finally ended. Napoleon Bonaparte dictated peace terms to Austria, and the Treaty of Campo Formio included a specific demand: release Lafayette or else. So, on September 19th, 1797, Lafayette, Adrienne, and their daughters walked out of Olmütz as free people. The Austrian emperor, trying to save face, said that Lafayette was being freed simply because of the emperor's desire to favor and gratify America. Even Austria acknowledged that what Lafayette was: an American. Many years later, in 1824, President James Monroe invited Lafayette back to the United States as the nation's guest. He was 67 and the last surviving general of the Revolution. He toured all 24 states over 13 months. Tens of thousands of people turned out everywhere he went. He became the first foreign dignitary to address a joint session of Congress. They gave him $200,000 in thanks for his service, the equivalent of $6.6 million in 2026. Today, at least 36 American cities bear his name as a result of that tour. One of his final stops was George Washington's tomb at Mount Vernon, where he wept for the man he revered as a father. When he left America for the last time, he took some soil from Bunker Hill, the site of the first battle of the Revolution, home with him. When he died in 1834, that soil was poured over his coffin. His wish was to be buried in both French and American soil, because he was a citizen of both countries. Ever since 1917, an American flag has flown without interruption over Lafayette's grave in Picpus Cemetery in Paris, every single day. It was first placed there by American troops arriving to liberate France during World War I. Colonel Charles Stanton visited Lafayette's grave, placed the flag, and said 4 words that echo through history: "Lafayette, we are here," freeing the country of his birth as he once helped free ours. In 2002, Congress passed a joint resolution making Lafayette an honorary citizen of the United States, only the 6th person in history to receive that honor. And here's something I want to be clear about as far as my position and the position of this channel. The 2002 Act was not the beginning of Lafayette's American citizenship. It was a reaffirmation. Congress was catching up to what Maryland declared in 1784. Lafayette was an American citizen. He has always been an American citizen. The 2002 resolution was Congress saying, yes, we know, we've always known, and let's make sure that no one forgets. And speaking of that Maryland resolution, it has never been revoked. It's still valid law and still on the books. In 1932, Lafayette's descendant, René de Chambrun, successfully used this resolution to establish his own American citizenship. The legal power of that original grant is still being felt centuries later. So what does this mean for you? It means that belonging to more than one nation is not a modern invention. It's not a loophole. It's not a scheme. It is as old as the United States of America itself. And when the worst happened, when the guillotine was falling, when the dungeon doors closed, when a mother needed to cross a war zone, when children needed safety, it was citizenship that provided that path. Not wealth, not titles, not political connections, citizenship. That's what we talk about on this channel every single week. The idea that having your documents in order and understanding your options before you need them is not paranoia. It's wisdom. Lafayette knew it in 1784, his wife knew it in 1795, and you can know it today. If you want to understand the modern landscape of citizenship, check out our video on Italian citizenship changes. The Guillotine decree is reshaping one of the most popular citizenship by descent pathways in the world. And if you're exploring the digital nomad route, we've got a full breakdown of the Italian digital nomad visa. I'll link those in the description. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. We go deep on topics like this every week: the history, the law, the strategy, and the stories of real people who understood that a second citizenship isn't just a document, it's a lifeline. So vive la France, vive la liberté. The right information makes this all possible. I'm Brad with Evolution Expats, and I'll see you in our next video.